Cacklefest.
Yeah.
I see a lot of familiar faces out there, but for some of you that have never seen this before, these are the cars in the 60s that were cutting the big ones, the big numbers, and the low ETs on the drag strip. They burn nitromethane, the same fuel that they burn today, and they make a little less horsepower. But the fact is that these cars ran over 240 miles an hour in 1965, 1968. Now, we've got 4 of them here, and we're going to fire them up 2 at a time, just like they were going to come up to the starting line and make a drag race out of it. And I want to talk about this Hustler. It's shown in this picture because Art Chrisman made this car famous. Art Chrisman was my hero, and I looked up to him when I was a young drag racer in Cleveland, Ohio, and I thought, boy, that guy really knows what he's doing, and I kind of formed my drag racing career after his. And he and Frank Cannon had this car, and who was on the pit crew? Don Prieto. Don Prieto, in the later years, restored it, and he's now the owner with his wife Patty, and he's sitting in the seat. And he's going to be firing up right after Soapy Sales. Hold your applause till these 2 shut down, and then we'll talk about these 2, and then they'll fire up. So now, Soapy Sales is a dragster from the late 60s, and it's owned by the guy sitting in the seat, and the guy standing there with the big black hat. That's Tommy Allen, and that's Roland standing there. He's going to crank this engine over with the starter motor on the front. And this car was a big winner in the 60s. It was Bakersfield winner, and they were all over the West Coast making big news. So I want to say one thing before they kick it off, that these photographs are free, and they're in these white envelopes. For the first people that come up and drop we'd like to have you drop your business card in the box and take one of these. Not only are they photographs, 4 of them, of these cars, but there's a CD or a BBD in there, and that's a story about the book that I'm writing about the memories of drag racing. Hey, we got some competition. Anyway, so at this time, come on up and see Gigi, and she'll give you one of these envelopes, and you can drop your card in there. So anyway, we're gonna go now, and Roland's gonna crank that engine over, and he first does it on alcohol because the nitromethane doesn't like a cold engine, so they run it about 30 seconds on alcohol, and then they switch over to nitromethane, and you'll be able to hear the difference. It's 4 or 5 times louder. And not only is it louder, but if you're downwind, you're going to get the fumes that makes your eyes water and your nose run and everything. That's called a nitro fix. You'll love it. Okay, Roland, let's roll them.
Pretty good crowd.
The one that I'm standing in front of is one that I built myself in 1964, and I raced it until 1965. And then it disappeared for 50 years, and then I restored it, well, in 2013. So, it's 53 years since I drove that car in competition, but it was a lot of fun back then. Now we've got my crew chief, Terry. He's gonna fire it up for me. And I want you to know a little different about, you saw the starters on those two cars. They had an aircraft starter, and before they did that, they turned the engine over backwards in case there was any puddles of nitro in the cylinders that doesn't like to start when there's a hydraulic lock of nitro. So on this one, we've got two starter motors. One runs the engine backwards. That's why it says twin spin on it. And Terry's going to hit the right starter, and it's going to spin the engine backwards and get any nitromethane out of the cylinders if there's any in there. And I don't think there is, but Terry hit that left starter. Okay, now we're going to jump over to this car, this beautiful, beautiful Dodge-powered Tony Nancy car. And I'm telling you, from Oklahoma, they brought it all the way up from Tulsa, Oklahoma. John Ness brought this up. He restores these cars, and he's got several in his inventory. But what John does is he makes them so perfect. This is a Tony Nancy car from the mid-60s. And what's unique about this car is that Robert Peterson, Hot Rod Magazine magnate, started Hot Rod Magazine, and in the mid-60s, late 60s, he was going to introduce a museum in Hollywood, and he asked Tony Nancy, on our debut of the museum, would you come down on Hollywood Boulevard and just do a little cackle like this? He saw what it was, a little noise and that, maybe a little short burnout. Well, Tony Nancy got carried away with his burnout, and he went about 1,000 feet. And he blew all the windows out of the hotel, and Mr. Peterson had to pay a big, large bill for replacing all the windows that were just rattled right out on the ground in glass. So that's a nice story. It's in a new book that just came out, The Hot Rod Empire. And there's the author right there, Gigi Carlton. Now, I want to tell you something about the driver, the guy that's sitting in this car. His name is Harry the Grenade Hibler. And when I was in Cleveland, just basking around in the snow, wishing I could be a drag racer, and I was hoping to get out there, and I finally did make it out with a gas-powered dragster, something like this, only not as pretty. And so before I did go out, I learned how to run it on nitromethane, and it was like going from stocker to a big super modified. So what happened is I got really nervous about the whole thing, and Harry was one of my heroes, and I read about him constantly. And when I get out there, and I says, Harry, I get in this car, and I'm a little apprehensive about it because I see all these people that are blowing these engines to kingdom come, and the pieces are coming right back in our faces, and they're getting burned and killed. And I says, that kind of makes me a little nervous. How does it make you feel? And Harry said, he says, I hear what you're saying, but I'm never really very comfortable in the seat of this dragster of mine unless I'm going at least 250 miles an hour through the traps, on fire and upside down. And I thought, okay, that's a good idea. That's the guy, my hero, right here. Okay. So what we're going to do is we're going to fire up the Tony Nancy car with Harry in the seat, and we're going to put the starter on the front, and we're going to fire it on alcohol, and we're going to let it run just like it hurt Tommy Allen, and then we're going to switch it over to nitromethane, and then Harry is going to fire up this car. He doesn't have to crank it backwards. All he has to do is hit a button, and you'll see this line up here, and it'll shove alcohol up into the blower, that little low blower line on the side, and then he's going to run it for 30 seconds while that one's running, and then he's going to switch it over to nitro, and we're going to hear 2 loud nitro engines running. Fire it up.